I know you were disappointed with Okami not being in my top list.
Well, I mean, look, I wouldn't say I was disappointed. I mean, it was a little sad because, I mean, it's one of those games that was just so artistically beautiful. I kind of figured it would be somewhere on your top 25, maybe like at the bottom or something, but it got beat out. I was just rather surprised with that one, in my perfectly honest opinion.
So it was between Okami and this game.
Oh,
Yeah,
go on.
and that game for me was Super Mario Sunshine.
Really now.
Yes, because out of all the 3D Mario games that I played, so I played Mario 64,
Hmm.
which is aged mostly well. I played Galaxy, and honestly, I couldn't get into Galaxy. I just couldn't. But that was I don't really remember why. I was like 12. I'm pretty sure me as an adult would need to replay it now that I have a bit more open mind. But both then and now, out of all the 3D Mario games, honestly, Sunshine was the one that really was the one I had the most fun with. So there's two things looking back at Sunshine. The first one, and this is something that's been talked about for years and years now, especially with video essays regarding Sunshine, and that is immersion. The thing about Sunshine is that, yeah, you're in one world traveling to different locations, but you can physically see those locations. Out in the distance over the sea, oh, hey, here's that random island. Well, yeah, you go to said island. The world is just consistent, it feels complete.
And just the fact that, I mean, that's really what a lot of people like to like draw like comparisons to like that overall concept of, okay, if this is an open world, that means if I can see a location off in the distance, can I actually be able to go there? If I can, that means yes. It actually does accomplish that overall objective. And for Sunshine to be able to do that, that's already a good, benchmark to have been able to meet, first of all. Um, I think that for me, of all the Mario games, like I feel like 64 was probably the one that I would say was the last game that I actually played for Super Mario. Previously then it was Mario Kart on the DS, and then before that it was like Super Mario World 3 or something like that. So for me, Sunshine was one of those games that I can't say I paid too much attention to. I mean, I did hear about it at one point, but I never really knew like quite what to expect with it, if it was going to be anything like 64. And I guess in a way it kind of was. Just, actually being within the world itself and not necessarily being, confined to a castle and like traveling through paintings just to be able to like get certain objectives done and such.
Also, I think one of my lesser gripes about 64 is how, because everything's in a castle, the overall like sense of exploration just feels more condensed because you're traveling from room to room. You have a proper hub world and lots of open space for you to just goof around, which brings me to my second point. Sunshine has that GTA factor. You can just run around, goof around, and just cause mayhem. Maybe not to the same extent as actual Grand Theft Auto or even Jack and Daxter, where you have the military chasing you down. But 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 in Sunshine, you can like spray down NPCs, and yeah, they'll like yell at you and whatnot.
Will they do anything to like fight back at you? Will they
No.
will they throw an apple at you?
I
Throw
kind
like a
of
bunch of produce at you?
I kind of wish they did,
Oh,
especially
that would be so funny.
especially since a few of the NPCs they are like fruit vendors. Like,
Oh god.
yeah, they're actually selling like coconuts, bananas, and whatnot, and That'd be a cool feature. You spray them and then they just throw their own produce at you.
Okay, I feel so freaking silly for saying this, but I immediately thought of that cabbage vendor from Avatar: The Last Airbender. What if you messed up his stand? He gets fed up and he just throws his cabbages at you.
Honestly, whenever I hear the word vendor, I just think of the coconut vendor from Survivor now.
Please remind me, what did he say?
A-
That is just so meme worthy.
As a coconut vendor, I seek truth. It's like
Jeff.
one of the most hippie things I have ever heard.
Just absolute chef's kiss for complete and utter weirdness. Good grief. Whoever that guy was, thank you. Thank you. But thank goodness this game is actually giving you even more of a sense of like just mindless fun when it comes to like just causing mayhem. I still am rather surprised with myself how back then when I was a kid, that's a little bit more of the mindset that I have compared to how I am now. So I feel like if I played this as a game like back then, I feel like this could have been something that I would have had a lot of fun with.
I wish I had my GameCube.
I wish I had a GameCube. Oh God.
I know where to get one, and unfortunately, it's not cheap.
That's unfortunate.
Alright, so that's my number 16, quote unquote. How about yours?
Well, quote unquote, number 16 for me, this is probably the game that is I want to say is the most recent game to come out of every single one that I have on this list. Surprisingly enough, this took me a little bit to like really think about like, do I really want this on my list, or is it just like, something that I am allowing my recency bias to like kind of like, take over?
So similar to with me and Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, kind of almost. But this one has had like about, I want to say 5 years to have any like sort of effect. But I didn't play it until like I want to say last year and a half, more or less. So again, for me, it's a recency bias. But I have to give credit where credit is due. Red Dead Redemption 2 left one hell of an impression for me as a game with what I have to say was the absolute biggest surprise that a prequel sequel could possibly give me. When Red Dead Redemption came out all the way back in 2010, that game, it almost feels like back then it was legendary. It had one hell of a revenge story. It had a very, very grounded protagonist with what was arguably one of the most amazing voiceover performances for John Marston ever, or for any video game character ever. And the gameplay, it felt very similar with like, what we had experienced previously with like Grand Theft Auto games and such. But the fact of the matter was, we went from freaking modern day to the death of the Wild West, essentially. And then years later, almost a decade had passed when any of us had begun to wonder, is Rockstar actually going to do anything with Red Dead Redemption 1? Because we had ideas as to how exactly the story could continue, except this time they decided to tell the story of what happened that led to the events that the first game ended up showing you. And even though you know exactly what is going to happen, how it's going to turn out in the end, it's just so tragic the way that everything unfolds. The main protagonist that you play as, Arthur Morgan, none of us had ever really quite anticipated that he was going to be, somebody that could top John Marston, because at that point we had never had such like a wonderful portrayal of a very flawed and grounded character like him until we finally got to see Arthur Morgan. And he turned out to be either just as, if not even more likable And I was just quite shocked at that. Seeing his transition of his overall journey of, wrestling with the fact of I'm an outlaw, therefore I'm a bad man. I should be just doing bad things, really. But the more and more that I go out into the world, the more I see this dire situation that I'm in with my group and how we're just heading downhill into a world that does not accept outlaws anymore, that does not accept the Wild West anymore. Is there any chance for me to be any semblance of a good person? Can a bad man truly, in the end, turn out to be a good one? That simple question that takes the entire course of the game to answer was very heartbreaking. There's really a reason why this game has been on a lot of people's lists of like most memorable games of all time. And I have to say, I'm one of them. Like, yes, the gameplay isn't exactly all that memorable. It's got a lot of mundane, like, things to do, like, hunting, like going for bounties, helping strangers out in the world with some of the most funniest or some of the weirdest or some of the most like gritty side quests that you'll ever come across. But throughout that journey, that realism, like holy crap, the realism that Rockstar really put into like portraying every single detail of what it was like to live all the way back in at the end of 1899, I believe, was amazing. It was just so freaking well done. Like on a technical level, this game was basically near flawless. And I reveled in seeing every single one of these details. It just added into that overall immersion that I had, that just I could not be able to like bring myself to pull away from the game at times. It was just that amazing for me. Like the stupid comments that I would see online about all of the freaking memes, all of the absolutely funny encounters that I would find people posting online. All of that is just like the cherry on top of things that you can do, the mayhem that you can cause in this world. But the serious aspects of Red Dead Redemption 2 are my favorites. And that's why I have to include this on this list, because I don't think I had ever felt quite the amount of depression towards a specific character, a specific outcome than I had with this game in more recent memory. And that's why I loved it.
Back to that point about Arthur Morgan and his old character being the question of can a bad person do good? I think it does help that it is set in old American Wild West and whatnot. There was a point in time where a lot of the Western TV shows during like I want to say like the 30s and 40s, a lot of them were westerns, and they always portrayed the American cowboy as a good person. Yeah, but history says otherwise, and history says that that time period, the period of cowboys, outlaws, and bandits, yeah, no, it was very, very grim and chaotic.
Definitely. Like there was no like necessarily strictly good and bad, and there was a lot of bad during the Wild West. I mean, as the name implies, like everywhere you went, there was practically no real law to
Yeah,
prevent anybody from being able to just mess up your day. And it like even in this game, there were plenty of instances where that can be able to like truly, like you can really see just how messed up some of the things that your gang does to some random citizen that's just literally trying to go about living their day, or maybe even trying to go about like earning their wages to, I don't know, I guess pay off hospital bills or something. Like you are literally robbing people's livelihoods to sustain your own. And at several points throughout this game, you as the player with Arthur Morgan, you have the opportunity to, to see not only in scripted cutscenes as to whether or not like he feels remorse for any of it, depending like on your choices on whether he is, turning into a good guy or if he's just full blown turning into a cold blooded killer. The way that it plays out for either direction feels visceral. The facial animations, dude, that went into this, like you can see just how each decision impacts the character himself, how seeing all this chaos unfold, you can see it in his eyes. And that's a level of detail compounded with the reality of back then that just makes this game seem all the more realistic. And you really can't help but break away. Like you cannot break away from seeing something like this because you just want to see you're just way too invested in it. That's what I loved about it so much. Like, sure, it's very difficult to come to terms with the fact that you're taking part in things that are just cruel for all intents and purposes. But as a viewer here for the story, give me more. This is way too real, but I love every single second of it. I want to be able to explore the parts of the human psyche that are either willing to commit heinous crimes in order to sustain your own life, or suddenly second guessing yourself and wondering, am I doing the right thing, or is it too late for me to actually put some good back into this world? And that's a theme that you see permeating throughout the entire game. And the way that each of these choices like are brought up, it's like you're presented at a metaphorical like crossroads or something. Do I go here? Do I go there? Am I going to regret any one of these decisions? Maybe, but once you go down that path, there's no going back. And that's the kind of level of storytelling when you see the consequences play out that feels gut wrenching in the end.
I'll get around to it one day.
I none of us, I guarantee you that none of us as players were ever prepared for the level of depression that we got in the end when we saw everything play out, when we saw the overall conclusion. But the journey from start to finish was a complete one, and I couldn't ask for anything more. Rockstar really delivered, and I can definitely understand why people were very upset that this was robbed as Game of the Year for 2018. I can definitely understand why people felt that way.
But it did win a ton of other rewards.
Yes, and for best voice actor with oh, goodness gracious, I feel so bad. I forgot what his name was,
Uh,
but
you mean
it
Kratos'
was
VA?
no. The voice actor for Arthur Morgan. Good grief, what's his name? I want to actually say his name. Roger Clark. Thank you. Dear goodness gracious, knocked it out of the freaking park. I love this man's voice. He is a standard, I swear. Good grief. He definitely deserved that award. Definitely. Without a single doubt in my mind, he definitely deserved that award. And I'm so happy that in the end, he got it. I salute you, sir.
Let me see if the game's on sale. Cause
Did I convince you to like get it by my rant?
I mean I've had it on my wish list for a while, but it was never a priority for me. Cause for Steam, your wish list, you can actually rank games from like 1 to however many games you want in your wish list. For me, Red Dead was always like in the 20s to 30s, just because I was further interested in just other games.
Again, the good thing about it is if you really want to be able to experience it before getting your hands on Red Dead 1, that's perfectly fine. When I played Red Dead Redemption 1, obviously I knew how the story was going to play out, but it did allow me to have a lot more of this sense of like a spoiler paradox. Like you know what's going to happen in the end, but you still want to see the journey from start to finish anyways because you want to know how that execution is going to end up playing out. And like I said, it was phenomenal, dude. It was absolutely phenomenal. Like this was storytelling at its finest, truly. And honestly, with I want to say there is a lack of Wild West games or really much of any media nowadays because I feel like the last I saw anything remotely associated with the Wild West, a movie called The Magnificent Seven, I believe, and that came out in like 2016 or 2017. It's like the whole concept of like the few against the many. That was literally the last time I saw anything Wild West. And then we get this game, and I'm like, oh my God, where has this been?
I do remember us having a discussion about this, how the Western genre kind of died, and now it's actually slowly returning.
Well, good. Because honestly, I feel like spaghetti westerns were really people's only real exposure to the Wild West, quote unquote. And honestly, they're not bad per se, but that is really the only medium that people truly remember westerns for. Like I don't see much of, any TV shows, much of any movies or games for that matter. And I'm just glad that Rockstar is given the chance to be able to produce this game so much more to a very very good complete product in the end. Though I will say it is still very heartbreaking to see that they still devoted a whole lot more time to GTA Online, developing more missions for it and such, rather than actually giving more content to Red Dead Redemption 2 online. Because
Yeah.
that's a community that really desperately wants this game to continue to thrive. But for the reason of greed, no matter what, they're always going to focus on their cash cow, Grand Theft Auto 5. Again, I understand. I understand because it's massively successful. I get that, but like don't leave Red Dead in the dust. Come on. You have a very dedicated player base there too.
I mean, yeah, GTA is their flagship series, and we finally got some more Red Dead. But did we forget about Bully?
That's true too. That is very true. Game I have to admit, I have always been very morbidly curious about. Like I just see snippets of it and I'm like, I want to know. What the frick is this game?
Bully?
Yes.
I
Like I
feel
said, I only see snippets of it and I just want to know what am I doing here?
I feel like there is like a very small team at Rockstar Studios who just said, okay, let's just make a game that's just pure stupid nonsense and fun, and then we got Bully.
And we still don't have any word if it's going to return or not.
Nah, I mean, I know it got ports to modern consoles and Steam.
But no word on like any form of like a sequel or anything, right? Which I'm pretty sure is what people have been asking for.
There was like I think it was like a pending copyright for something that implied another Bully game. We just don't know if it's a sequel or something. But
Or something.
yeah, because realistically, well, we see that Rockstar they take time with their games. Okay,
Yeah, they
B2
do.
from GTA 5. Wait, how long was the gap between GTA 5 and Red Dead 2?
Let's see. GTA 5 came out on the PS3, Xbox
360,
360.
and that was like what, 2013 or 14?
Yes, that was 2013.
And then we finally got Red Dead 2 in 2018.
Hmm.
Rockstar takes a lot of time when making a full product.
They do. And as a last note for Red Dead Redemption 2, again, like I really don't think that I talked about Arthur Morgan himself enough, but like just my final notes on him. I just love that overall concept of a hard man that's turned vulnerable. A man that basically says, I'm facing death and acting foolish. Dear God, that's like absolutely one of his most memorable quotes because like just overall to see the breakdown of a character's like old views and ways and then really opening their eyes to accepting the reality and really appreciating what they have and the people that they've met along the way, like especially in this character's case, it just it hits hard knowing that the people that you have essentially been with your entire life, one way or another, even if your life is devoted to them, you have to really open your eyes to see that there are flaws. And even if like I said, even if I know the story of how it's going to turn out to be thanks to me playing Red Dead 1 all those years ago, Rockstar still didn't make it easy to digest. Like Arthur Morgan was a hell of a man, and one despite that claiming he doesn't know anything about anything was unbelievably wise in the absolute simplest ways. Because in the end, for somebody that really truly believes himself to be a bad man, you really do see that in the end, he was a good and honorable man down to his core. And I hope when you get the chance to play this game, you will see exactly what I mean.
Definitely.
Love you, Arthur Morgan.
All right.
What is your number 17?
Number 17. So, my number 17 is Minecraft. And here's the thing. I know people are thinking, "No, you were a kid, you played this back in 2010 when it released." Actually, no. No. I did not play Minecraft until I was an adult in college in 2018. And I have a very vivid memory of me and my friends in college during, I'm pretty sure it was the winter break. We literally got on Minecraft together. It was probably like 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. We just kept playing until 4 a.m. Then we
What
decided.
the frick?
Then we finally decided to go to bed. Then I woke up at like probably like close to like 9. I just immediately got back on. Minecraft is okay. So I would say for me, one of Minecraft's biggest appeals is just having the freedom to be creative, and especially if you're like me and you grew up playing with a lot of Legos. Well, Minecraft is the closest thing to that. Well, other than the Lego games. But while my friends are actually like making preparations to go to the Nether Realm and slay the Ender Dragon, I'm just trying to build like forts, castles, and a hotel made of pure glass. I'm trying to be like an artsy architect. And of course those goofballs ruin everything.
I I feel so sad that I can absolutely picture that perfectly in my mind, how that all plays out.
It goes as well as you think it does.
So not well at all,
No.
essentially.
I'm pretty sure there was one time my character died in his sleep because
What?
yeah, so the thing in Minecraft is that when you go to sleep, that bed you sleep in is your respawn point. So I went to bed, and if all the players that you're playing with go to bed, you just skip nighttime and it goes immediately into day because nighttime is when all the enemies start spawning. I have my player model like go to bed. I have my respawn point set, but realistically, a lot of the times I'm just waiting for them to also go to bed because I don't want to deal with any creepers or whatnot destroying my projects. But those knuckleheads decide to keep working, and yes, a creeper blew up on the other side of the wall where I was sleeping.
Bro. Are you? Oh my god.
I have a lot of good and disappointing memories playing Minecraft, but which is why I usually try to play on creative. But yeah, being able honestly just being able to build whatever you want. The creative aspect of Minecraft is the big appeal for me.
Are there games out there that can be able to match it, or is it still like fairly unmatched just because of how popular it is?
I mean, in terms of the farming, survival, and crafting aspects of Minecraft, probably the closest would be something like Stardew Valley and maybe some other farming simulators. But Minecraft is both a farming simulator, an open world adventure game, and also just a sandbox creative game. I'm not sure. I can't think of any game that does all of those. I really can't.
You mean certainly not to a degree like what Minecraft does?
Yes.
Mm. Because to be perfectly honest with you, I've never played a game of Minecraft before in my life. Ever. I have heard endless things about it, except for the fact that apparently there is a final boss to Minecraft.
Yes. Yes, there is.
I didn't know that. I thought it was literally just nothing but the creative mode. I didn't know that there were, like weird enemies to stalk you at night. I had those stupid what do you call those like tall dark dudes that are basically Slendermen but creepier with like purple eyes or something.
Enderman.
Oh my god, they're so creepy.
Yes, and they can teleport behind you.
I don't like that. Please no. Absolutely not. Please no. Like I said, those were the aspects that I had absolutely no idea about for Minecraft. I've just seen plenty of video about how people make the most absurd feats of architecture in this game.
And I love it.
It's fantastic. It's mind blowing. How much freaking time did you put in to create this stuff? That's what I want to know.
And for a lot of those videos, those are like whole teams. It's not even one person.
And that's still very incredible. Truly.
The amount of patience, let alone the probably the amount of math that they have to do to figure all that out is pretty astounding.
Agreed. Very much agreed. And I feel kind of bad because, like, even for a creative mode that literally lets you complete or just make stuff however you want to make it, I'm not sure if I'm that creative enough to just make whatever random stuff might come into my imagination. Not to mention the facts that, putting in all that time and effort to, bringing it to life and just ironing out like every little mini detail that could make it, be actually perfect. A lot of the times I'm thinking to myself, I mean, do I want to do that? Or do I actually want to make sure that my backlog gets shorter and shorter with the time that I spend creating, I don't know, a freaking house, a moderately good one in Minecraft? Because, like I said, if I were to make anything in Minecraft, I'd be paranoid because I want it to be perfect. And perfection, or anything close to it, takes a long time.
Yeah. I cannot
And
disagree
that's
with that.
and that is something I've always been afraid of when it comes to Minecraft creative mode. How much time could I possibly lose in this?
So yeah, let me know whenever you're interested in playing Minecraft.
Oh, good grief. What random stuff could possibly pop up in my mind that I would want to create?
Do you want to build a 5-star luxury hotel made of glass?
Just for giggles? Why not?
All right. It's settled. We will mark our calendars.
Let's go. Oh, wait, wrong game.
Actually, there is Mario DLC for the Nintendo ports of Minecraft.
Oh, for frick's sake!
But otherwise, introduce me to your number 17.
My number 17 is going to be one of, let me see, one, two, three, four, five entries in the same franchise. Well, actually, no, six entries in the same franchise.
I was about to ask what, why, but then I think I know where you're going with this.
You know.
Yeah.
Anybody who knows me knows.
Yep, alright,
It's
continue.
it's it's Okay, I'm gonna start off with what I am probably gonna say is my absolute most replayed of the OG games in the Resident Evil franchise, and that is Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. In short, it's an awesome game. And I very much say that it's very likely that amongst the community for Resident Evil, especially in the games, or rather for the people that were able to like get their hands on the originals, whether it be playing them all the way back during like the first generation of consoles, or maybe even backwards compatibility with PS3, or maybe if you're streaming it somehow. Um, a lot of people are gonna end up saying it's a good game and it's not quite as, good as what Resident Evil 2 is, but it's still an immensely enjoyable game. To a degree, I am one of those people as well, but to be perfectly honest, like I pretty much enjoy every single one of these OG games equally. Yes, even the first one with that god awful dialogue that's very, very fairly certain still holds the Guinness World Records for worst dialogue ever in a video game. Yes, I still love that game as well. But to be perfectly honest, Nemesis really left a lasting impression on me because of the title villain. I don't think any Resident Evil game in the franchise has come close to giving me a memorable monster as Nemesis himself. And funny enough, I don't even want to include the remake because remake version of Nemesis is he's a chump. I'm just gonna say that he's really not that intimidating as what you got to play here on the PS1. And not to mention the fact that it had a returning character with Jill Valentine, and the fact that the game actually takes place within the actual city itself, Raccoon City. And I don't necessarily think that, Resident Evil 2 is necessarily an improvement over RE2 because it's like generally speaking, it's the same almost everything. But it's just the fact that this time the game itself takes place within the city. There's more zombies to fight. There's a lot more ground to cover. And it's just ambitious in the sense that it really tried to be a lot more action oriented compared to its predecessors. And I would say that for the most part, it definitely succeeded and it turned out to be a lot of fun as a result. And I don't think that this is necessarily a fact that is really going to be all that surprising for people because I feel like at this point, a lot of people already know this. But just in case, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was technically not supposed to be a numbered title. It was supposed to be a spin off. And the actual number 3 was supposed to go over to Code Veronica.
Really now?
Because, yes.
Well, in terms of RE trivia, that's up there for me along with RE4 was originally going to be Devil May Cry.
Yeah. Surprising, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, there you go. You learned something new. This game was meant to be a spin-off, and it makes sense because in terms of, whether of how the story like is supposed to actually move forward, yes, from the continuation of Resident Evil 2 that focuses on Leon Scott Kennedy and Claire Redfield, Code Veronica is a continuation of her mission to find Chris Redfield. Whereas with Resident Evil 3, it seems more like a side story that focuses on Jill Valentine's efforts to escape Raccoon City before it gets effectively nuked from the face of the earth. But yeah, like due to complications in development, Nemesis just ended up being like the official third sequel like in the game. And like I mentioned, like Resident Evil 3, the fact that it was able to like take place within Raccoon City really allowed you to see a lot more of the chaos that actually ensued. Like just the intro, I'm not sure if necessarily like the intro cutscene per se. I mean, I guess it could be because you know how, when you boot up games, sometimes they'll have like a little like a sort of
A cinematic for the main menu.
exactly like it's the same thing that plays out like when you first load in the game.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact of the matter is, when you go through these streets and you see all of the destruction that was ensued as a result of the T virus leaking out into the city, there was a major part of me that really wondered, like, oh my God, what was the city like before everything went to hell? How did this city look like on just a normal day? Because all it took was one day, maybe even less than that, to cause this poor Midwestern town to just turn into a freaking graveyard of the living dead. You can hear people screaming off in the distance only to find out that, like, you're too late to come to their rescue. You can see the bodies of freaking RPD law enforcement and even, umbrella biomeasure counter service, like just failing to fight back against like all of these zombies that just ended up overwhelming this once peaceful town. It's these environments are really it's a lot more developed in the environmental storytelling than what you could really see in previous entries like, 1 and 2. And this is, obviously going to be a huge difference whenever you talk about comparisons between RE3 original and the remake. It's just the fact that yes, you actually do get the feel that you are able to travel through an entire city, whereas in the remake, we all know, like almost everybody knows at this point, that it has a lot of cut content. Capcom had the opportunity to be able to add in so much more to make it really feel like you are going through from maybe even one end of the city all the way to the other and see just all of the crazy crap in between. I would have loved for that opportunity, but alas, we didn't get it, and so we sat here in the OG. Granted, if you're able to get past the old, like not pixel graphics, but the old graphics of the games back then, you're in for a treat. Like this game renders everything wonderfully for a title that was released all the way back in like 1999. Yeah, and not to mention the fact that this was the first game that really introduced, branching actions. Like like say in your first encounter with Nemesis, if you really wanted to, fight the monster, you could fight the monster, or if you wanted to escape into the police station, you could. Like these are split-second decisions that you can make, and it will change how the story is played out. And I loved it for that. You can really alter what cutscenes and what characters end up living or end up dying. It's just so fascinating because it really just makes you want to replay more and more different ways to see how the story plays out, how certain characters interact with you and such. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why I go back to it every so often. Aside from the fact that whenever you play the game and you save over um, the save file that you use, you get access to, I believe, 8 or 9 epilogue cards that give you a little bit more information as to what other characters are doing within the universe of Resident Evil.
You mean before or during the actual events of RE3?
I want to say during and slightly after.
Okay.
And yeah, like maybe like puzzles wise, this game was a little bit light on them, but they are pretty infamous amongst the community. But yeah, like this was just one of those games that I really enjoyed my time with. They had a lot more weapons to choose to be able to play. They had the ability to be able to craft ammo for different weapons, so you really had to be strategic with it. Despite the fact that it's a lot more action oriented, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can just go all gung ho with every single zombie in this game. You still had to like strategize which areas do you want to sink your time and ammo into, only to find out, crap, maybe I should have saved it for this boss battle over here further down the line. I'm not necessarily sure if it's just the overall lens of nostalgia or if it's just the fact that we got introduced to Leon, I guess, or Claire with Resident Evil 2, but I do feel like Resident Evil 3 OG is one of those games that gets what's the phrase? Gets slept
Overshadowed.
on. I was gonna say slept on just because it's like, it's not really talked about as much because people tend to look at RE2 a whole lot more than RE3. I hope I used that phrase correctly, but yeah, overshadow would probably be like a better phrase, but
Because even as someone who still has not touched anything Resident Evil related, I can tell you that I hear more about RE2 over 3, definitely. If anything, I hear the most about RE2 and 4.
okay. I feel like, well, I mean, what do those games have in common?
Um, a really hunky protagonist,
By the name of
Leon Kennedy. Oh, and a very,
and
very,
Hunk.
and let's not forget a very attractive lady in red.
A very, very iconic femme fatale for me, who remains to this day to be my favorite character in the RE franchise. But yeah, like just my overall I guess closing thoughts on it on this game. It's just overall it was a very fun and incredibly enjoyable game. Like I can understand that it wasn't quite as tightly focused in terms of story for, like Resident Evil 2, but I would say that these two games were different enough in terms of character growth, story, and it's especially the gameplay because RE3 is definitely a lot more action oriented. It really has a whole lot more weaponry at your disposal. The fact that you can be able to craft, ammo for different weapons and such, and you can be able to like even find ammo amongst like the streets of Raccoon City. Like there were times in which you just go up to some random body that doesn't actually look like it has anything shiny on it, but when you go up to it, you press X, it turns out like Jill kneels down and holy crap, this body is actually holding like two magazines for handgun ammo. And it really does encourage that exploration of the city so that you can be able to still stay alive in, such a crazy situation like this. And I don't think I genuinely hold to the opinion. I don't think it's necessarily that much of a hot take anymore, but Nemesis himself was just absolutely excellent. His gameplay, the visual designs, like he absolutely was so dynamic. It still surprises me to this day. Like he always found a way to keep me on my toes. I really never knew quite when to expect him as I'm just roaming around the city streets, the the back alleys. Like I had to basically really be on the lookout for any like potential change in music or any potential like like tall, hunky voices in the distance that just says stars. And I'm like, Tech nabbit, I either gotta run through this area or I gotta go back through the door that I came in, maybe reload the area and hope to goodness gracious that the dude just disappears. But most of the time, no. He's still there waiting for you. He's still absolutely there waiting for you. That son of a biscuit. The fact that we actually got to see Raccoon City in a former glory, it's such a landmark location for this entire franchise. I don't think that people give this game enough credit for that. And I hope people I hope that more people get the chance to actually play it because it's just a lot of fun. Like no matter what, it's going to be a lot of fun whenever you play through it.
Or, re-release the OG games.
Because I hate the fact that they are locked behind streaming. I can't even be able to actually own the games when I play them on my PS4 or my PS5. No, I have to freaking stream them.
Are they still on the PlayStation Store for PS3?
I believe so, yes.
Well, for those of us who still have a PS3 lying around, there's an option.
There is an option. And I'm very thankful that they haven't gotten rid of the servers for the PS3 yet because I have a lot of games that I have purchased. I don't have any additional storage, so I just have to hope to goodness gracious that Sony does not axe my ability to be able to access all of those old games.
About that. I don't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago, but Sony was planning to just completely gut the PlayStation Store for PS3, and there was massive backlash.
Yes, that actually happened more like because this happened when I was in college, actually. Like during my final years when I was in college.
Was it that long ago? I remember it like it was yesterday.
I feel like it was that long ago, honestly.
Really?
I want to say yes because it doesn't it was recent but not that recent enough, if that makes sense.
And then the newest thing is that Sony, any digital purchases for specifically movies and TV shows, Sony is taking that content down, but they're not completely at fault because they are citing a licensing as part of the issues.
Dang. That's oh man, that's unfortunate. It really is.
Yeah.
But even so, like these games were released on their consoles like way back when. I see no reason for why they can't simply add the most basic backwards compatibility like what we had with the PS3.
Yeah.
Like game conservation is a thing. Like I don't want to have to just like I don't even know if my own laptop can truly be able to like run this game smoothly enough. I imagine that it probably could, but I've never actually done that. I've never actually played a game on my laptop. I feel more comfortable actually having it on a console. Why is it such a huge issue to give us backwards compatibility when Xbox seems to be excelling in that department? They can do it. Why can't Sony? I can't tell you just how disappointed my uncle that basically introduced me to his entire library of games and got me into like I want to say he was the reason I got into Resident Evil in the first place when he learned that these newer generation of consoles have a lack of backwards compatibility. Apparently, he was so unbelievably disappointed. He was speechless for like a good half hour. It feels like it should be a fundamental feature at this point.
Nope, not anymore.
Not everybody owns a working PS1 or the discs for that matter. My PS2 is shot. I can't be able to read anything on it anymore. I rely on that backwards compatibility. Sony, come on. This can't be the end for this.
At the very least, just re-release it on for modern consoles. Sure, I would buy OG Resident Evil 1 through 3, 1, 2, and 3 for like $20 or whatever.
But just give me that option.
I know. I imagine it's not that difficult. The entire Final Fantasy franchise has been ported over to modern consoles. It can be done.
It can be done. I am looking at you, Sony. This isn't over. It will never be over. Just because the remakes are coming out doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't an audience of people that want these OG games. Not to mention the fact that I'm not exactly the biggest fan of the direction that the remakes are going in, but that's a whole other discussion, and I digress. That's a discussion I'll leave for later down the line. I'll say that.
I feel like that's a discussion that you and I could have together when I actually start getting through the RE series.
If I give like if you had access to my PS3 right now, would you be interested in playing those OG games? Because like I said, I have them all.
The PS1 versions?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. You'll also be able to hear one of the absolute most cursed video game OSTs ever It's very infamous. I feel like I'm not sure if anybody knows what I'm talking about when you go down into the basement or one of the basements for RE1 Director's Cut. But somebody that does not know anything about music, I'm pretty sure it was a deaf person made this. Yeah, this was something that was put into the game, and I feel like you're gonna have a laugh from it. That's one of the unintentional comedic things that I kind of love about RE1. And I can't wait for you to hear it.
Well, you're building up my interest. All right. So now we are at number 18.
Yes, 18.
Okay.
What is it?
So this one also has a bit of recency bias applied to it, but I went into this game knowing fully aware as to what I was getting myself into. This is Nier Replicant, the remake version that we got in 2000, I think it was 2021.
A very anticipated title for quite a number of my friends. I will definitely say that.
I made 3 videos on this game. I kind of don't know what more I need to say.
Do you want to recap just in case, like, there are those that haven't actually seen the videos, maybe?
Well, other than please go watch them. So I actually started with Nier Automata, and then that's when I decided to do a deep dive into the entire creative mind of Yoko Taro, and to learn that he began with Drakengard, and Drakengard canonically leads into Nier. Yoko Taro games are an experience you're not going to get with a whole lot of other games.
Meaning it's going to leave you confused as heck the first time.
Oh no, I definitely will. And part of that is because the Drakengard games and even Nier and Nier Automata, you can play them by themselves without the context of how they lead into one another. But if you want said context, oh my goodness, you're gonna have to go through a lot of hoops and hurdles between like manga side stories, CD dramas, stage plays, novellas. There's like a lot of side content that explains how one leads into another. And my goodness, there's like never a happy ending with any of these.
I just wanted you to imagine that I'm just kind of like slowly shaking my head. I'm just like, there's a lot that you guys are going to have to like go through just to be able to get some kind of an idea as to what exactly happens in these games that lead to the state of the world. It, like even if you were trying to like even if I had to try to like summarize in like a couple of sentences, I guarantee you you're going to like end up scratching your head being like, what the fudge did I just hear? Because these are so unbelievably out of the freaking ballpark weird in terms of how you get to these particular circumstances that these games are based in. And even after I watched like more than a couple of lore videos that attempt to explain the entire timeline, I'm telling you, I'm still confused as heck. I have a basic understanding, a very basic one, yes. But the finer details are what I am most curious about. And the finer details are just insane.
Yeah.
I can't describe it any more than that.
I guess for those who are not familiar with Yoko Taro, so you are aware that Nier Automata is getting an anime, or has an anime adaptation, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what if I told you it's actually not a one-to-one recreation of the game?
Why? That's my first thought.
Because Yoko Taro, well, he specifically did not want it to be a one-to-one recreation of the game. He wanted to do something different. So, what the anime does, on the surface, yeah, it does recreate a lot of scenes from the game, but Yoko Taro being Yoko Taro, he does add a lot of a lot of imagery. Well, I guess not necessarily imagery. He adds new scenes that were not present in Automata the game. And currently it's leading to this theory that perhaps the Automata anime is a prequel to the Automata game.
So a different model for 2B and 9S?
Essentially.
Bro,
But the bigger
why?
question, because it's Yoko Taro, that's why. But the bigger question of why do I prefer Replicant over Automata? For me, that just really comes down to, I would
You three
say,
videos?
well, yeah, yeah. Go watch those, by the way. It's really just the story on how on the surface it is just a simple story of an older brother trying to protect his younger sister, only for it to be so much more than that. It turns into very much a question about, I was about to say a question about like morality and ethics, but no, that's way too vague. What's the phrase I'm looking for? I have like three different ways I want to say it, and I don't know which one to use.
I can feel that frustration. I
Yes.
really can. There is, if I may,
Go
there
ahead.
is one aspect about this that I have to admit I've never been a fan of with pretty much anything really. It's like the whole fact that if you want to get caught up with a story or if you want to like, learn more about certain things that for all intents and purposes can be portrayed in games, you have to go through so many forms of multimedia just to be able to learn about more lore, if you will. Like for me, when it came to like the freaking Resident Evil franchise, I've never been a fan of having to like go outside the games themselves in order to have to learn new information that should have been present because it is pertinent to the story that I'm currently playing in. That's just an annoyance for me, like a personal annoyance. This is like the director's way of being able to like, give like multiple perspectives that he specifically did not want present in the games themselves, then okay, sure, that's valid, I suppose, because that's his own desires. I'm just saying that like it's for me personally, it's something of an annoyance when it's not something that I can be able to just access immediately by going through the finer details of the game. Like I would be perfectly fine having to decipher these things if they were presented to me in like a manner like freaking um like what Miyazaki does with his Soulsborne games. I'd be perfectly fine having to go through and decipher like putting together pieces to tell an overall like arching story, but not having to go outside of the game to really have an understanding of other things that happened. Like I said, it's a personal annoyance for me, especially when you have like CD dramas that are absolutely inaccessible in whatever country you reside in, except for I don't know, I guess Japan in this case,
Yes.
because that's just like that's another level of annoying. You have to find somebody that has made, I guess, maybe like made posts like forum posts or maybe made videos or was maybe I guess lucky enough to gotten their hands on a copy and maybe shared it to others or something. I don't know. Like you have to jump through so many hurdles just to get your hands on these things. That's just annoying. I really can't find another way to describe it other than annoying. It's and a little bit it's almost like gatekeeping, but not quite the word I'm using, like not quite the word I'm looking for.
Like I said, all of Yoko Taro's games, whether it be Dragon Guard or both Nier games, they are meant to be enjoyed individually. You do not need to know that they're connected. But then this goes back to your point. It is there if you want to take that dive, but that dive is a lot of obstacles to get through.
Way too many.
Yes.
Speaking of obstacles, have you figured out which phrase you wanted to describe?
Yes. So it goes from a story of older brother protect younger sister, or in the initial Western release, a father protecting daughter, and it turns into a question of what sacrifices are you willing to make, whether that be for family, for friends and companions, to even greater, yeah, I would even say like the greater good and all of everything that exists. Because yes, there are catastrophic consequences for our characters. As much as I want to give an example, I would really have to I would have to just spoil everything. Including the fact that Nier Replicant has one of my favorite plot twists in any storytelling ever.
Would it be something along the lines of, oh, if you do this, you completely alter the course of, or you completely alter the very fabric of reality? Is it like that monumental?
Okay, maybe not reality because we're not diving into multiverses, or yeah, we're not diving into like alternate realities or anything. More like if you do this thing, then you will change the course of the human race.
Are you prepared to make that sacrifice?
If you want the answer to that question, go play the game.
That would be such a good tagline.
It says a lot that even back in the initial release for Xbox 360 and PS3, and those versions were not that good. They were very clunky and unrefined. But even despite its flaws, it still kept a very dedicated following because they can see the potential the game has. It offered something that a lot of games were not willing to dabble into. I think the closest comparison I would be able to make was what I felt playing Nier Replicant, I have not felt since my first time playing Majora's Mask at like age 4.
So, guys, that's pretty freaking monumental. You have any more thoughts that you want to say on this game?
Did I mention that I made 3 videos for Nier Replicant? And I'm probably gonna make a 4th.
Really?
Yeah, I like diving into the characters.
Well, I, for one, am absolutely excited for it. Bring it.
I do not have a release date.
But it's planned.
Yep, in my imaginary planner. But what's not on your planner anymore is your number 18.
Not on my planner anymore, you say.
I mean, unless you just want to stop, then yeah, it'll stay on your planner for forever and ever.
Okay, fine, fair point. All right, so for my number 18, like I said, I'm going to be going through essentially 6 in the same series. So, what is the next one? Well, this is really not going to be a surprise to anybody, but specifically, it is the OG for Resident Evil 4.
I thought I was going to predict that OG Resident Evil 4 would be in your top 5, maybe your number 5.
To be perfectly honest with you, it was a contender for being in my top 5. Just because this is probably my absolute most replayed game in the entire series. Like I literally have lost count of how many times I've gone through this game. I've literally explored everything. I've done everything. I've even played this game with the most absolute weirdest and funnest cheat codes. I just experienced as much of it as I possibly could. And I never got tired of it every single time. But there is another game that I felt was somehow, well, actually, I know how, but somehow in the minds of others was more worthy to be in my top 5. But I'll get to that when we get there to our top 5. But Resident Evil 4 OG, like I said, it must not have been much of a surprise for anybody knowing me, knowing my favorite franchise, that this would be on my list of top 25 ever. At the time when this came out, it really was just quite brilliant in every single aspect. It's not even necessarily to mention the fact that it was one of the most revolutionary games to ever release in gaming history. The whole popularization of the over the shoulder third person perspective, like what you see, like with games like, let's say freaking pick any game out there that has that over the shoulder perspective. You can thank this game for popularizing it, essentially. It was that revolutionary. And I was kind of surprised learning about that too, just because I was like, wait, seriously? this game made that possible. It's such a basic concept. It's such a basic, like, a game mechanic. You cannot tell me that this was one of the most important influences on the gaming history as a whole.
Okay, just with this knowledge, I feel like in the future we should have a discussion on legitimately the most influential games like ever.
I feel like that would be very fascinating to have a discussion on.
Because just as you're mentioning how RE4 popularized third person over the shoulder shooters, my mind actually went into the opposite direction and how Half-Life popularized the first person shooter genre and how pretty much every first person shooter mimics that kind of style.
I still need to get into Half-Life. I feel like I feel so incredibly out of the loop for not having played those. I've heard of them, but I haven't actually played those, and I feel quite sad about it.
Don't worry, I've only played the first one. I still have not played the second one,
Isn't the
which
second one like so highly regarded too?
yes, that's my point. That's why I'm saying it.
But yeah, like oh gosh, I'm going off topic here, but
Go
again,
ahead.
like I said, you really would not think that, RE4 would have that kind of, such a huge influence on gaming history as a whole. Because really the only thing that you can really say coming from Code Veronica over to Resident Evil 4 is just the fact that we have now done away with the fixed camera angles, or even like the camera angles that are fixed at a certain point but can still follow you, like, as you're moving like down a hallway or anything like that. Like that sort of camera perspective. With RE4, it was just officially dead. There was no way that Capcom was ever going to come back to it because of the massive success that this game mechanic has brought to the table. And yeah, I understand that, and I'm not going to lie, I'm probably one of the few people that actually misses that fixed camera angle. I'm going to point over to Tormented Souls. That game was a lot of fun, and I still very much loved that it was essentially a love letter to those old classic survival horror games, in particular, Resident Evil. Uh, what was the other one called? Alone in the Dark, Silent Hill, that sort of thing. Like just that overall classic formula that these old franchises brought. That's what I miss, and that's what made me love that game so much. And you can kind of sort of argue that in a kind of sort of way, RE4 might have been something of a downward spiral for the franchise, because afterwards, depending on how you feel with the later games, it marked the start of more actiony Resident Evil, and therefore not as scary in the eyes of many who play this franchise.
So there's two things I want to say about that. The first thing is that I'm actually kind of surprised. I am surprised, but I really shouldn't. Is that on RE4's release, there was an audience who did not like the game, and they said this is not Resident Evil because they grew up with the OG Resident Evil games where you had the fixed camera angles and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads into the deep dive of, oh well, how many changes can a game make and it will still be said game, which an example being Final Fantasy and its quote unquote identity crisis, leaving turn-based RPG for action.
Didn't number 11 mark that start, if I remember correctly?
11, I think technically yes, because 11 was an MMO.
But it's like kind of just that overall concept that, you go for something new to a point where now people are questioning, is this really,
Is is
a
the
game in the series? You know?
Yes, or even is this a good direction for the series?
For me specifically, what I thought was something that Resident Evil 4 didn't seem all that Resident Evil is not necessarily the change in gameplay mechanics. It's more so the enemies that you fight. Gone are the days in which we have, mad freaking scientists that are trying to manipulate the evolution of cellular growth to essentially either advance human evolution or maybe just create monsters out of revenge or whatever the case may be. Gone are those days of actual like bioterror on a cellular level. And now we move into monsters that are more, I guess, how
Oh,
can I say this really? It's like
would you
they're
say
monsters
would you say that they
that
are a result of said science experiments?
the monsters that you face in like the OG games?
Oh, I thought you were talking about the
Or
monsters in RE4.
oh no, these are not science experiments.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's the thing that people absolutely pointed to as what the heck, this isn't Resident Evil. This is not, bioterror in the sense that this was, lab grown. This was not, people manipulating the very fabric of nature to create something truly horrifying. No, this was something I don't necessarily think that this is quite a spoiler, to be honest. This is just, an aspect of the monsters that you fight. But this was something that is found apparently in nature. This is something that can actually be found, like the origins of it underground. Somehow these roamed about.
This is something that God created.
Yeah, essentially. It's like, how the heck did we go from dealing with zombies to dealing with uh, frog-based bioorganic weapons to infected dogs? How did we go from uh, people like mutating to being lab experiments to becoming indestructible forces of nature? Like, how did we go from stuff that was literally in a lab to something that is actually in the world and people just dug it up at the wrong time? That's what people were like, okay, is this actually Resident Evil or is this just a change for the sake of being a change? That is the one aspect about this that I'm like, okay, I definitely see where you're coming from. And I am, for the longest time, I was also definitely in that ballpark. And honestly, I still kind of am because there's no real explanation for how these things are still here. Not even the remake gives you any questions about that stuff. But like Resident Evil 4, for all intents and purposes, was just such a change in identity. Like down to its core, that's really what it was at the end of the day. Did it turn out to be massively successful? Absolutely.
Yep.
There's no doubt about that in anybody's mind that this turned out to be massively, supremely successful. But again, it marks the start for a change in identity for the entire franchise moving forward. Those are like the controversial aspects about RE4 that I don't think anybody can truly deny. Now, what about the good stuff? The good stuff that I remember. Well, for starters, I don't know why, but one of the first things that I point to on aspects that I really enjoyed about RE4. And no, I'm not just going to talk about the characters because yes, they're a staple. We know. I love Leon Kennedy with all my heart. He's one of my favorite characters ever. I love Ada Wong. She is one of my top 3 femme fatales of all time. But I love the music. I love that there were very weird tracks that know how to calm you down and give you a moment to breathe, but also just give you that suspense, that uncertainty of being in such a hostile and unsettling environment. I mean, and speaking of like, for a game that came out all the way back in 2005, like these environments and backgrounds, they looked really good. And even when I go through and play through it now, I still think that they look good. And that's not even mentioning the HD project that, I can't remember if it's a team of people, if it's one person, but the HD project where they really refine those graphics, dag nabbit, it's so cool. And just the dedication to like bringing this game even more to life is just legitimately wonderful. And back then, I loved the detail in things like the facial animations, the fluidity of movements, the overall like the transformations of a lot of the monsters in this game. It's just so like it was so grotesque at the time, and I was enthralled by it. It was great. And even then, like with something like the gameplay, it's still very solid. Like I don't know if people really noticed this, but the gameplay itself had a lot of callbacks to the original games, such as the lack of being able to move while you aim. Just like in the OGs, if you wanted to go ahead and aim at something, you had to stop, you had to turn around, whether it be with the quick turn that was introduced in RE3, or whether it be like using your directional buttons to like slowly turn your character around and then aim at a zombie. It was reminiscent of it. RE4 OG kept that, and it was, I guess you could say, it was reminiscent of the old tank controls, if you will. Like even the need to go back over to your inventory screen just to switch to different weapons was also a pretty cool callback. That again, I don't necessarily think that a lot of people have really attributed from like things that they kept from the OG games. And God, that inventory screen, just the fact that it was something that could give you like a good pause from the moments where you're about to like get hit by an enemy, where you're about to get chomped on by a freaking dog or a regenerator or whatever the frick. Like just that split second where you can be able to breathe, but then you're terrified to go back and unpause because you know what's gonna happen. Oh man, like I'm recalling so many, just so many times in which something like that legitimately has given me heart attacks when I was a kid playing this. And again, I haven't even mentioned the freaking inventory Tetris, the birth of the inventory Tetris, dude. Thank you, RE4, for giving me that small joy. It's such a small joy, but I love it to this day. And good grief, can we talk about the voice acting for RE4?
It's not Jill Sandwich levels of weird.
It's actually improved upon. You
Yes.
actually have fully voiced dialogue that sounds that's such good quality. Yes, we were given the ability to hear Ashley's constant screams whenever you need to, save her from enemies or whenever you needed to catch her from a high place. Yes. Ashley
Leon!
Graham. Why would you do that?
I'm just
How dare
practicing.
you? For what?
I'm practicing.
You keep practicing.
Leon!
I'm not even gonna try. I don't want to do that to my voice. I'm sorry, Sandy. What was her name? Caroline Lawrence. I'm sorry, but what the frick? Why? Why? That's possibly the only annoying aspect of her. That unfortunately, whenever people look back on OG RE4, it's like, okay, see, automatically, OG is not as good because we have these this horrible screams from Ashley, and I'm like, have you heard the new voice actress? She sounds exactly the same. She hasn't changed. What are you guys talking about? But anyways, just like I digress. I love the voice work for every single character in this game, and I will maintain this to my freaking dying day. Well, Paul Mercier as Leon will forever more be the definitive voice of Leon for me. Just absolutely. Paul Haddad, all the way back in the OG RE2, I will never forget that. But Tag Nabbit, Paul Mercer's voice was just, it was the pinnacle for me. I don't think anybody's been truly able to top that. The only person that meets it maybe is Matt Mercer, just because he
Yeah.
brings about an older sound, an older believable transition into Leon, like aged 8 to 10 years older. That's what I loved about his performance.
Yeah, because, well, especially going from RE2 to 4, Leon is not some rookie who is trying to work on his first day at a new job. No, no, no.
Definitely not.
No. He's been living in this apocalypse for quite a while.
And he still has ghosts to deal with, and it manifests. It really does. And Sally Cahill, good God, just thank goodness that they kept her from OG to over here in number 4. She is just so phenomenal. I love that sultry, mysterious voice of hers. It just fits her character so incredibly well. I wish there was some kind of a mod, some kind of a voice mod to include her in in the remake.
There is, but it's AI generated.
Ugh, I wish I could still hear it though. I still want to hear it because look, I don't want to apologize for this because again, I don't feel bad for saying it, but I do not like the voice actors that they had for the RE4 remake. She killed Ada Wong for me. How the frick do you do that to my favorite character in the series? A performance that bad, I can't actually fully enjoy her character in the remake? Wonderful accomplishment, Lily Gao. Wonderful accomplishment. And I will forevermore be pissed off about that.
Out of all of Capcom's bad voice acting that I have heard from, I would say that performance is the absolute bottom of it all.
That says a lot.
I would ra-
Especially coming from you. Especially coming from you, that says a lot.
I would rather listen to "What Am I Fighting For," or even fill her dark soul with light. I think though
Oh.
I think those two atrocious performances, performances slash deliveries, are still miles better than what we got in RE4 remake. Poor Ada.
Because seriously, you cannot tell me that a voice performance from Lily Gao is any good because she sounds bored with every single line that she has. And I'm not entirely sure whether or not this is true, but apparently she voice recorded her lines from home.
I think that's something that a lot of the voice acting industry does. Cause I saw a video in like 2000, like maybe 13, 14. Johnny Young Bosch did an interview and he says, "Yeah, I love my job. I get to go into my office and work in my PJs."
And yet when he does that, he gives top quality voice acting. Do we have that with Lily Gao?
No, and acting on stage, let alone acting on camera, those are two different skill sets from actual voice acting.
And she does not have that. Look, I don't care whether or not she is ethnically correct for the role. If she can't voice act, choose another ethnically correct voice actress that can actually bring the character to life in a proper manner. Because I don't care whether or not you have the privilege to be able to voice act a character. You have no right whatsoever to change the overall attitude and mindset and overall presentation and really, for the lack of a better word, motivation and character of somebody who's already been established in this franchise for 20 plus years. No matter what, you cannot just go ahead and say, "Oh, I feel so honored to be able to like play this character, but at the same time, I wanted to change things up so that she's more of a survivor rather than a mysterious femme fatale that you've all come to expect from Ada Wong." It's like you cannot change established lore just for the sake of being able to portray a character the way that you want.
At that point, she's
Arrogant.
essentially applying her own fan fiction to not just a character that is established, but to a character that was written by someone else.
And I don't think I can properly forgive the ADR director either for allowing this to happen. Why how like what in your mind like what were you possibly thinking when you heard these voice lines and thought, "Okay, yes, that's the Ada Wong we're looking for." Ada Wong sounds bored? She doesn't even sound remotely playful with Leon, and she's supposed to be that way. That is her character. She messes with him. She leads him on so that she can be able to accomplish her objectives. That's just what she does. It's messed up of Ada as a character, yes, but that's what she does. That is who she is. The more I think about it, the more I truly wish I could actually hear that AI generated like Sally Cahill over Ada in the remake. Because dear God, dude, like it doesn't even have to be Sally Cahill. It could be freaking Courtney Taylor from Resident Evil 6. She still does a great job. It could be any one of the other voice actresses that has had the privilege of being able to portray Ada Wong, and I guarantee you, every one of them, even the subpar ones, sound better than Lily Gao. It was up to Capcom, and I'm pretty sure this is Capcom USA's fault, but it was up to them to find somebody that can be able to deliver a proper voice performance for a character that everybody points to as being one of the most iconic femme fatales in any franchise ever. It was up to them, and they messed up bad. And I don't think I can forgive them for that. They made me lose interest in a character I love dearly with all my heart and soul. Every single time I see her cutscenes, I skip them in the remake. How did you do this to her?
And this is why the original is still worth playing.
Definitely. Because the dialogue and voiceover in this game is believable, it's well executed, and it just sounded very dynamic. Don't sleep on it because I guarantee you, it still very much holds up to this day. I think that even if nostalgia was definitely could have been a factor for me including RE4 on my list, and just the fact that I've replayed it so many times, the fact that even if you have access to being able to have that over the shoulder third person perspective and have access to a whole bunch of insane weaponry, like just knowing that you can still be unnerved at the sight of certain monsters or just feel that tension of going through certain areas, RE4 still has that. I don't think it'll ever really stop having that for me. And if it's able to do that, even like what, 18 years after its initial release, I think that that's definitely a reason for why I would include it on this list, at the very least. And with that, what have we made it to? Number 19?
19. All right. So, my number 19 is a game that has actually grown on me, let alone the entire genre that it's in. Path of Exile. So, the ARPG genre is something that I have been growing very fond of for quite a bit now. And as I've already said, I'm a sucker for games where you can build builds, build your characters. And Path of Exile lets you build just about anything. Do you want to be a necromancer and summon zombies and skeletons? Yes, you can do that. Do you want to shoot lightning arrows that bounce off of walls and the enemies? Yes, you can do that. Do you want to summon a ring of fire around you and you could just walk through all your enemies and watch them explode? And then those explosions cause more enemies to explode. Yes, you can do that. Again, Path of Exile lets you build just about anything. But it comes at the cost of accessibility. I mean accessibility as in the game has a very high learning curve. I have about almost 300 hours in Path of Exile, and there's a lot that I still do not know. And even after watching many tutorial and guide videos, I am still learning what some of this stuff does. That's just how much there is to this game. Your creativity is heavily rewarded, but to reach said creativity, you need to climb a very high knowledge curve.
In other words, you gotta put in the work.
Yes,
to
very
know.
much.
Just like when you got me into Path of Exile for the first time, and there we were exploring like, certain builds that I could, might maybe be interested in. And in order to get to said specific build, I have to follow a very precise line through the skill tree that I'm just like, bro, there's way too much to start with. There's way too many branching paths. The fact that I really have to stick to one path in order to ensure that I have this proper build is scary, because what if I had gone into this game thinking, okay, I have a general idea for what I want, and I just level up like, anything and everything, but it's not optimal and it might even kill my build for all I know.
That honestly, that is one of the big criticisms about Path of Exile, even for active players, is that once you screw up, oh boy, especially on the skill tree, yeah, it's gonna be a painful path. Because unlike other games like Diablo and even Borderlands, there's at least like an NPC or at least a designated spot where you can literally reset all your skill points back down to zero, and then you could just start from the beginning. Path of Exile, if you want to redo your build, you need to farm a very specific currency for it. To undo your mistake, you have to continuously play the game and hope to RNGesus that you get the currency that you need.
If you're willing to sink in all that time,
Or
best of luck to you.
the only other methods of resetting your build is waiting for a big patch where they rebalance the game. Even some of the abilities you could pick up in your skill tree, in which you just get you have the opportunity for a free full reset, but that can be months of waiting.
I'm not sure I would know of much of any people that would be willing to do that, unless they have other games to occupy themselves in the meantime. I mean, it's an opportunity to be able to like undo your mistakes, but that's not ideal. Having to wait for so long just for the opportunity to change.
The community says, especially for new players, follow a guide. In fact, there's no shame in following a guide, because this game can be pretty unforgivable at times.
It's fun. I can definitely say, like from me playing it for the first time, it is very fun, and it can get, like enemy waves coming after you can get a little overwhelming, but honestly, I like you become invested in it to where you do want to continue. You do want to see, like, okay, this is how I started out. What's it going to be like when I finally make it to a point where like this build works out for me? That's for me personally, that's what I'm curious about.
I do believe one of the key developers, maybe even the director of Path of Exile, he did say that he does want the game to be infinitely replayable, in which, given the large amount of customization you can do and theory crafting, yes, I would say they very much accomplished that.
I applaud him for it. Anything else you want to add? Or shall we move on to my entry?
I will let the lady of the house speak.
Okay. Where did I leave off? It's number 19, correct?
Yes. And the next Resident Evil title for us is.
The last traditional of the OG style. Code Veronica X. This, I would say, is probably I, I feel like for me personally, not only does this game have arguably my top contender along with the RE4 save theme, this game is also very much constantly competing with RE4 for the top spot of the save theme. Dear God, that music is so beautiful. I wish I knew how to play the piano properly so I could be able to do this. But anyways, let me just get that out of the way to move on to like aspects like, the story. Like I mentioned before with the previous RE trivia, this game was definitely meant to be the true Resident Evil 3 because it does come as a continuation of Claire's journey to finding her brother, Chris Redfield. When she came to Raccoon City in RE2, literally her goal was just to find Chris because he had essentially cut contact with everybody because Umbrella had been coming after him from the events of the first game. He didn't find him and therefore has gone to great lengths breaking into Umbrella facilities to try to find out if they know anything about his locations. As a result, it has landed her on an island that is essentially a training facility for all of their top military forces, if you will, including one of my absolute favorite side characters in the RE franchise, Punk. God, I love that man to death. But anyways, this being a continuation, it's kind of difficult for me to truly say that it was very expansive with when it comes to like the storytelling department because with OG games they don't really do they've never really done a whole lot to like present like the story in like a cinematic format to a degree that games nowadays are able to do, but still being able to go from point A, solve a puzzle, point B, and then being able to like go around the island and being able to still pick up clues of environmental storytelling and still being able to have, cutscenes with different characters and, more motivations and more lore about these different people and even your main protagonists included are able to like give a little bit more depth when you thought you knew everything about them. It allows for the story to be a little bit more gripping because you really do want to see success in the end. You really do want to see just the main goal that's been essentially ongoing for, I want to say, over the course of like maybe in Claire's case, I want to say it was from either 6 months to 9 months that she spent looking for her only other living relative. I feel like for me, I relate to that just because the theme of family, no matter what, in any medium, is always going to get to me. It's just something that really like speaks to me. Like I have my siblings and such. I would most likely, like if I were in Claire's shoes, I would most likely go to the lengths that she does to find them if they turn out to be like my only living relatives, if I were in her shoes. And that's what I felt allowed the story to be a lot more personal, a lot more gripping for me in comparison to all of the other OG games. And I do praise it for that. The main villains here in this game are just, I can't exactly say that they were all that like, multi-dimensional or anything, but what was presented, they were just a combination of just like a very like creepy, they were very arrogant and very mysterious in their upbringing and such. And the more you go through reading the different notes that are scattered around the entire island based off of, how they ran things on this, like in this place, how they were brought about into the world, the different accomplishments that really give more insight into how Umbrella operated as a whole and the different founders as well. It was one of these games that just allowed for a lot more a microscopic lens into the true insanity that goes into creating these BOWs. Like the very first thought that these people, these founders had that led to the overall creation of such a very evil organization, you find that here and you get to see even more of like the deep personal consequences for these founders. And it's disturbing, like incredibly disturbing, especially what you encounter in this game. The environments are pretty just macabre. The new enemies that you fight are very, they look so freaking weird, but then when you dig deeper as to like how they were created, it sends chills down my spine almost every single time that I play through this game. I also very much loved the updated graphics for this game. Because this being, technically speaking, the last of the like traditional like OG games for Resident Evil, graphics wise, this game looks good. Like especially with the fixed camera angles that were present here, it looked, it sounded very good, and I think it still very much holds up to this day. I can still very much understand why people think that this should be, at the very least, the last remake that Capcom could make, though they basically confirmed that they're going to remake every single game, like every single mainline entry in the franchise, which
Yeah, mainline.
me personally, I'm against that. But I mean, if they really wanted to go out and make one more remake, at the very least, one more remake, yes, I can definitely see them doing that with Code Veronica. Every single emotional moment in this game, they have the ability to dial all that stuff up to 10 with the remake. I hope they do. Because if my heart was enough to get broken in certain aspects with this game, a remake can accomplish that even more. That's what I hope they do. And I really hope that they don't rewrite a whole lot, because there really isn't much that needs to be changed here. Whether it be for the sake of, telling the story better, or maybe there's just some, I don't know, problematic aspects that might not maybe fly well with like today's modern philosophies, I suppose. I'm not quite sure what the right word is for that, but there might be some aspects about this game that could be considered dated that they might update, I suppose. But all in all, for this game, it still very, very, very much holds up. And I do recommend that if anybody does have access to it, go ahead and play it. It's definitely a complete game from start to finish. And the additional lore alone, just knowing the villain's origins and the various projects that Umbrella's founders underwent, it's fascinating stuff. It truly is.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
Do you need to play Code Veronica to understand what happens in the next game? Or any events throughout the entire series? Do I absolutely need to play it?
Yes.
Okay.
And I got technically 3 words for you to justify that. Would you like to know?
Uh, God Albert Wesker.
Well, Wesker is one of them, but specifically Chris and Wesker.
Okay. So I asked my initial question because I do know that from my experience, I do know when it comes to Kingdom Hearts, people just ignore the quote unquote side games, believing that they're irrelevant. So I'm just curious to know, do you think there's people who skipped Code Veronica believing that it was irrelevant to the mainline series?
Yes, just because it does not have a number attached to it, they thought it was automatically irrelevant.
I hate those people.
I have to admit, me too. I won't lie, and I feel kind of bad for it, but it's a pet peeve that I just cannot ignore. Just play it. I promise you, you're not going to get bored with it. I promise you, it's not going to be unfulfilling. You are going to find a reason for having put your time and effort into it.
And that's what matters.
Truly. Not to mention that also, fair bit of trivia, I suppose. This is the last game that you ever see Claire Redfield in until years later, all the way in 2000 and what was it? 2015. So either 14 to 15 years later, we get to see Claire return.
Jeez, that's quite the vacation for her.
Exactly. The only every time you ever see her return again is in the 2008 Resident Evil CGI movie known as Resident Evil Degeneration, but because that is a side story that realistically does not impact the series overall, because it's literally just something that happened and it doesn't have like any overall consequence on the progression of the main conflict within the Resident Evil franchise. People wrote that off, and honestly, almost it honestly feels like almost nobody remembers the CG movies except for the most recent ones. So yeah, games wise, Claire disappeared for a good 15 years. So, aside from being able to understand the rivalry between Wesker and Chris, I think it's also pretty significant that you understand that this is the last time that you see what I thought was an iconic character to the franchise, but apparently not if they're only going to include her for 3 games overall and not talk about her at all in the span of those 15 years. So enjoy seeing Claire while it lasts. I'm just going to say that. Also, by the way, Allison Court. She has the voice of an angel. And the remake voice actress will never live up to her. I'm sorry. She does what she can. Allison Court just she has the voice of a big sister. And I love her for it.
That's one way to put it. Voice of a big sister. I don't think I've ever heard that kind of comparison before.
If you play RE2, I promise you'll understand what I mean. Again, I don't want to give any spoilers, but
No spoilers in this house.
like I want to be able to give a little bit more context to it. Some people might understand it, but unfortunately you won't. So I'm gonna keep my mouth shut on that. I promise you I will. But it'll make a little bit more sense when you get your hands on them.
All right.
And with that, we have come to our entry number 20.
All right, number 20, and then another row will be complete. Okay, so now we're going to get into another franchise that is near and dear to me. Starting off with Pokémon Emerald. So, Pokemon Ruby was my very first Pokemon game, but Emerald, which I would play much later, is the improved version of the initial Ruby and Sapphire releases. It even adds more content because this was in a time when Japan, they really like to release one game and then release a second updated version. I mean, we still see this with Persona, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So, Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald are all within the Hoenn region, and I love the Hoenn region. It gets memed on for trumpets and too much water. Okay, the trumpets one is valid, but those trumpets created some really good music, so I will personally let that slide. But the too much water criticism is bullshit. The Hoenn region has some pretty diverse locations. You got a forest where people literally live inside the trees, which I'm pretty sure is inspiration from Ocarina of Time. You even have a small village at the base of a mountain, and they utilize the heat from said. Oh no! Did I say mountain? No, they live at the bottom of at the base of a volcano, and they use the heat of said volcano to not only just for general warmth. They also use it for hot springs, and there's even a mountain of sand that you can bury yourself underneath, and it's supposed to be like an incubator for whenever you're carrying around Pokemon eggs. It's just that the Hoenn region has more world building than most people would give it credit for. And that's in addition to the crime syndicates of this game. Team Aqua and Team Magma. So admittedly, they are a mixture of stupid and dangerously stupid. Because one wants to expand the earth, meaning less water for everyone, and the other one wants to expand the ocean, meaning a lot of life on land is gonna die. Why would you want this? I don't know. I genuinely don't know, and that's why I say they are dangerously stupid.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wouldn't they both just be dangerously stupid? Because if you expand the earth and you take away the water source,
then everything will slowly die out because, hey, there's not enough drinking water to go around.
a la Mad Max.
Yes, very much.
Seriously, why? What kind of motivations are these? We want more water. We want less water.
I guess
Too much water.
I guess one of them has an extreme phobia of the ocean or something, and then the other one probably is living under the philosophy of we're born from the ocean, we return to the ocean.
Like Atlanteans.
Yes, and also, so we're still related to the Hoenn region. Technically, before I officially started playing Pokemon, I remember being 7 years old. I attended a summer program while my mom went to work. And there was one kid there. He was playing, I'm pretty sure it was Pokemon Sapphire. And I took a glance at his Game Boy. I see this tall bird on two legs with fire just coming out of its wrist. And I just thought that was the most badass thing ever. I will play this game just for that.
Really?
That Pokemon became Blaziken. And I fucking love Blaziken so much to this very day. Blaziken is the reason why I took an interest in Pokemon. And that's where my love for this franchise began.
Now that is a bit of trivia.
Very
That is
much.
wonderful. Fire coming out of his face. And that immediately put you into the Pokemon universe. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, because he just looked like a giant eagle with two legs and fire. But it turns out he was not an eagle. It was a chicken.
You know, okay, I'm not even gonna lie. I don't know why at one point I honestly thought he must have been one weird Power Ranger.
Wait, it was a Power Ranger. Where did you get that logic from?
I don't know, I was a kid.
I mean, I mean, there are Power Ranger helmets that are based off of animals, and yeah, a few of them are based off of like eagles and falcons, and even in the Persona series with Featherman, which is their version of Power Rangers,
Mm-hmm.
but I think more closely aligned with the Phoenix. I don't know. I'm trying to justify your silliness.
Look, I was a kid. I was a child. I had a much more wild imagination, a much more wild gameplay style, as you've heard. I enjoyed a game so much because of freaking ragdoll physics, dude. Come on. I was quite silly back then.
And you're still silly now.
In another manner, but yes.
Yes.
Yes, I am. Does that mean we transition into my number 20?
Go right on ahead.
Okay. This one's a bit of a weird one because I don't want to say too much that I am kind of cheating with this because I'm including technically two games. They were released as two games, but in my mind they should have been packaged all in one. And
Okay,
they
this
are
sounds like a Persona 2 situation.
it I promise you most likely it is. And they are Resident Evil Outbreak File 1 and File 2.
Okay, with titles like that, it sounds like it should have been one game.
Yes, like I said, it really should have been packaged together. I don't know if Capcom released a statement for why they released them as two separate titles, whether it be for like, maybe increased profits or whether it be because they didn't know if the game was going to be as successful as it was to warrant a sequel. But what we got was one of the first co-op Resident Evil experiences back then on the PS2 era.
Really, even before RE5?
Yes, before RE5. Because I'm pretty sure that this game came out in, I want to say 2004 and 2006 respectively. I might be off by some years, but I'm going off the top of my head right now. But yes, this came out before RE5. So this isn't necessarily like RE5 was not the first co-op game. No. Outbreak technically had that honor. But here's the thing though. Gaming online back then with the PS2 wasn't easy. It very much required a lot of effort, especially on my part, to be able to do that. And honestly, I got to a point where me personally, I couldn't get it to work. So I ended up just having to play with AI partners.
Understandable.
And let me tell you, the AI in this game can be very smart, very weird, or sometimes, funny enough, very vindictive.
Okay, that was not the word I was expecting.
I'm not kidding, dude. They oh god, okay. I will get to that point. Please, if I end up forgetting to explain why the AI can be so vindictive sometimes, please remind me, okay? Just in case I go off on a rant and I never get back to it.
Right.
But the overall premise for Resident Evil's Outbreak Files 1 and 2. This has really no significant ties to any of the main characters within the Resident Evil franchise. It centers around a group of people that were all basically in the same bar for all intents and purposes when the outbreak of Raccoon City first began. You've got a waitress, you've got a journalist, you've got two off-duty security guards, you've got a subway security guard, you've got a police officer, you've got a doctor, you've even got a freaking plumber in your midst, you've got a university student. You have an entire wide array of characters that come from very different backgrounds that just happen to find themselves in one location. And yes, you can pick and choose which one you play as, and then the game will, I guess, kind of either you get to pick or they get to pick the game which three other characters you work together with in order to make it out of Raccoon City. Like, that's the overall premise for the game itself. Now, the way that the game divvies up these missions is by giving you access to 5 scenarios each within each game, either 5 or 6 scenarios. I think 6 is a bonus, but realistically, I do believe that it is 5. Each of these 5 locations are places that the group goes through in order to find either rescue teams that might have posted, like warnings around town, like saying, hey, meet us over at this location at this specific time and we will get you out of here. Or it might have been like a way to get to another part of town in the hopes of finding like another exit. It might have been either or maybe like finding a scientist that might maybe have like a cure to all of this or something. It has different objectives to accomplish, but they all lead to an overarching goal of making it out of Raccoon City. Whether they had the knowledge of that the city was going to be bombed or whether they just knew that they needed to make it out alive, doesn't matter. These are people that banded together in order to stay alive and in order to make it out of this freaking hellhole. Again, I'm really not quite sure why Capcom divvied up these 10 to 12 scenarios separately when they should have been packaged all together, in my honest opinion. The only thing that I can possibly explain for why they were separate is because playing through these scenarios is very time consuming. You can spend hours upon hours just trying to find the next key, trying to figure out the next puzzle, trying to navigate your way through a certain area. It could be a zoo, it could be a hospital, it could be a secret underground umbrella facility, it could be an abandoned hospital like in the Arklane mountains. It's a wide variety of places that you can go to. Each location does offer additional information on the people that lived in the city. It could also offer up more information on how the city was built, how essentially it was, for all intents and purposes, controlled by Umbrella, how demented some of these people were even before the outbreak. Like some of these regular town people, like they were, for all intents and purposes, just plain psychopaths. And that was an aspect that I don't think Capcom really decided to explore until this particular game, to be honest. And I appreciate it because it really added this whole new level of tension that it's not just the zombies, it's not just these insane BOWs that are after you. Now you have to contend with, people that in and of itself, or rather, they were themselves like, still monsters before the outbreak even happened. It just gives them a more free reign to do whatever the heck they wanted to do without fear of the law now, essentially. And the way that the game goes about playing this in each of these scenarios is, especially with me, when I played with the AI, every single character has their own specific skill set. With my favorite character, Alyssa Ashcroft, who, funny enough, or rather surprisingly enough, I never thought I would ever see her again. But her name does come as an Easter egg in one of the much later games, one of the more recent titles. Thank God she's still alive in this universe, but I'll leave that I'll leave that as a clue for any of you guys to find if you end up finding it. But her particular skill set is lockpicks. She has a set of these weird keys in weird shapes that she could be able to use to unlock simple locks. You have to literally cycle through every single one of them to see which is going to unlock which. You have a police officer who has a very specialized handgun that if you allow him to, like, I guess, charge up a shot, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, to be honest, will allow for a more powerful shot against a zombie or against a monster or something. You've got a you can have a freaking character whose special ability is a lucky coin, and if you flip it, your luck changes. Now, whether it be for good or whether it be for bad, we don't know. But something changes. I never use that character, by the way. I never liked having that particular ability. Whenever I used it, I felt like things always turned out for the worse for me.
The coin was not in your favor.
You even have a character whose special ability is additional inventory space because she has a big freaking backpack to carry around. Guess which character that is? The freaking university student, of course.
I was jokingly gonna say a hiker.
That was
It still makes sense.
it does, but yeah, university student. She has extra space to carry stuff in because for some reason, well, I guess not for some reason, I guess it could be a little bit realistic. Every single character in this game, minus the university student, has only 4 inventory slots. Only 4. There's no additional backpacks to pick up. There's nothing that can increase your inventory space. You literally only have 4 spaces for either keys, for ammo, or for weapons. So, what do you do when you have something that you want to pick up, but you have to sacrifice another thing, but you know for sure you just cannot leave it behind?
You asked the
Exactly.
university student to carry it for you.
If she's in your party, yes. You can ask any other one of the AI characters to carry it for you, and they will either keep it in their inventory, or let's say if they had a handgun and you give them like a magazine, they're going to use it up because they're trying to defend themselves in some far off portion of the map. So if you're thinking of maybe like giving them like all of the ammo for you to for them to hold on to, maybe not a good idea because most likely they're going to end up using it very quickly on the most minor of creatures, even birds. Funny enough. Granted, these are infected birds, but still. Um,
So they're being vindictive to the birds, too.
yes. And thank you for bringing up that vindictive portion because the game also has this. I don't even remember. I genuinely don't believe that this was included in the booklets themselves. I think at least not certainly not for Outbreak File 2. I I don't think I have the booklet for the first one, but it is something of a hidden mechanic that certain characters are going to get along with others and certain characters are going to absolutely hate your guts. For some reason, the plumber and the journalist absolutely hate each other. The journalist might have something of a rocky, I guess, sort of clashy sort of personality with one another. Between the journalist and the hot-headed police officer, um, the doctor might have like a good standing with the waitress, or maybe the university student might feel a little bit safer around I guess like a more calmer but upbeat personality like the subway guard or something. Like there's all these different dynamics that can influence which characters would work with which. Whichever one you pick can also influence the AI in the game, whether it be which characters they choose or which characters you end up going with in the end. You really have to contend with the personality types of every single one of these characters because even if you attempt to spam, like get over here or go or help me or whatever other like dialogue prompts to get them to, cooperate with you,
They choose
they
not
could
to.
refuse you. They could refuse you at the worst possible times. You could be literally getting mauled to death and they'll just freaking leave you if they hate your guts enough.
Honestly, this sounds like this could be like a TV show.
It really could. And I can see that potential. I really could. Especially when you have enough material for just a short series, like, 12 episodes essentially. Yeah, that could very well work. But again, this was technically the first cooperative experience. Like, you could actually play with other people online. I was not lucky enough to be able to do that. So I just relied on my AI partners, which, to be perfectly honest, made things a whole lot more difficult for myself playing through these games with such a limited inventory and having to rely on these teammates not going off on their own trying to solve the freaking game is insanity. Like I could literally be going through the entire game step by step trying to solve a puzzle, trying to figure out where the heck I'm supposed to be going. I could not see one like let's just say character A was with me at the start. But then they went off on their own and I literally do not see them for let's say the entire scenario and when I make it to like the final boss of that scenario. And I think to myself, okay, they're not with me here in this area, so that must have mean that I guess they just died or they got lost and never made it in time to find me. No, I've had way too many freaking instances where I make it into the final boss and then there's just that random character A that's like, wait, what the frick? Where the heck have you been? And it turns out they're so unbelievably well stocked in ammo and health and just overall supplies. And I'm just like, you sons of biscuits. You left me to die, essentially. You're just so well off. And somehow you made it to the end of the game.
Wow, they really are vindictive.
Exactly. I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. There's a very I feel like there's quite a small community of people out there that have actually played these games that are really like trying their hardest to petition to Capcom like, hey, if you really want a good multiplayer experience, remake these games. They are the prime example of good cooperative experiences for the Resident Evil franchise. But no, instead what we got is Resistance and the RE-verse. What was it for like the freaking 25th anniversary for Resident Evil as a whole? We thought we were gonna end up getting like a remake of the Outbreak because they announced a new cooperative experience, but no, it turned out to be some mode where you play as random characters, random villains, and you're just killing each other in some weird battle royale kind of scenario that nobody played apparently.
That should have been a sign, Capcom.
It should have, but they didn't take it to heart. And I'm just still very much in the camp of being pissed off with them that they're not actually listening to their community. If they really wanted to go down this whole road of remakes, this is a perfect one. This is something I would try to convince my friends to maybe purchase, join up and play with me so that I can be able to go ahead and experience an actual cooperative experience going through each of these scenarios correctly instead of having to just wing it with a bunch of AI that could either trust me, not like me, or just flat out hate me. I just want them to make this already. They have the potential. I just don't understand why they haven't gone through and made it.
Based on the current direction that Resident Evil's going, I think the simple answer is they have priorities elsewhere.
They do. But if that were the case, why on earth put any attention towards resistance and reverse? Why dedicate any time to them at all if it turns out that they might be just half-assed and just experiences that nobody asked for? I mean, for goodness sake, they even include in microtransactions in these games.
I really can't say that I'm surprised.
I just think it's stupid.
Because it is.
Dagnab you, Capcom. I'm just saying, this is literally the prime time. I don't think you're gonna find a more perfect opportunity to remake a multiplayer experience than with these games. So yeah, like I said, I had to include these together because the only reason why why I personally think that they are separate games is because each of these scenarios are, like I said, they can take you upwards of hours to complete. It's like being in entire like separate areas of the city with its own with its own lore, with its own puzzles and such. And I feel like that's probably the only reason for why they broke them up into two separate entries. But all in all, my personal opinion, they should have been, put together.
I would like to think that at the minimum they could have like just put file 2 as like a second disc.
That too. You essentially go the route of like, Final Fantasy VII, right?
Exactly.
Or any of the old games. That would have been great. It really would have. I certainly would have preferred that instead of two separate entries, but I mean, that's how they released it. I digress. Oh well.
Can't change that.
And I hope I was able to give a little bit more interest towards the Outbreak series because honestly, and this is another aspect of the gameplay itself, but this was one of the last entries where they still have the fixed camera angle, but more specifically, this is the very first time where it introduces the fixed camera angle, but it follows you everywhere you go. So it's not just like, you have a camera at the end of the hallway and you can only be able to move your character from that fixed angle. No, this is a camera that stays at an angle, but it follows you everywhere you go. It follows you going down a hallway, it follows you going around a corner, that sort of thing. That's the very first time that Capcom has ever introduced that moving fixed camera angle. That's the kind of that's the camera angle that I love the most from the series. And I think that they should have made a callback game with that because this is possibly the only time in the series where we got to have this mechanic. I'm pretty sure that after this, after Code Veronica and after Outbreaks File 1 and 2, then that's when they transitioned completely into the over the shoulder third person perspective.
For RE4.
Correct.
As long as it's not as bad as Devil May Cry 1.
I genuinely don't think so, dude. I
Okay,
do not think
okay.
so.
Because Devil May Cry 1 kind of ruined my opinions when it comes to fixed camera angles.
I think that this one was a lot more forgiving. From my experience, it did not necessarily give me it didn't give me a hard time.
Okay, good.
The only thing that gave me a hard time was my teammates that didn't give a crap about me.
Your quote unquote teammates.
Exactly. It's like, dude, I gave you a herb. I'm giving you a weapon, a very good one. I'm giving you ammo so that you can stay alive. I'm trying to build good faith with you. Why are you still so hateful of me? And they don't even answer. They would just go off. They would just open the door, go through, and I will never see them again. Which I'm very fairly certain is something that a cooperative player might maybe do. And I think that that would be even funnier. But for AI, this was hilarious to me. Tragically hilarious, albeit, but hilarious nonetheless. Yeah, I hope I was able to give a little bit more perspective on these slightly more obscure Resident Evil games and why I love them so much. I had to include them on here because for me, it was another one of those entries within the franchise that was definitely revolutionary for me to play, for sure.
And I mean, I can see why. So far, you have 4 entries on your list.
So far, and I've yet to talk about the other ones. which I'm gonna save for next time.